I know that many of you know Senator Van Hollen well from his incredible leadership, but I want to say a few words about why today we are honoring Senator Van Hollen with FCNL's annual Justice Award. This award is given each year to a member of Congress who demonstrates their steadfast commitment to advancing a more just society and country. And Senator Van Hollen does that in so many ways. I could spend all morning talking about all the issues that he demonstrates leadership on, that we work on and care about, but I just want to mention three. First, Senator Van Hollen is a champion for keeping our local communities safe and addressing one of the largest epidemics facing our nation, gun violence. Now, the headlines gravitate towards mass shootings, and we mourn all of those, but the most common instances of gun violence, suicide, and community interpersonal gun violence receive a lot of less attention. And local, hyper-local partners, community-based groups that are working to stop violence block by block are vital to building more peaceful, resilient communities. Senator Van Hollen knows this. He understands the importance of these local community-led efforts to keep our communities safe, including programs like Safer Streets in Baltimore. And he has worked tirelessly this past year to ensure that funding through the Community Violence Intervention and Prevention Initiative, or what we call CVI, was protected. As a ranking member of the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee, or CJS, which is the body that oversees that annual spending on these programs, Senator Van Hollen cemented his legacy as an advocate for the prosperity of these investments, despite devastating cuts across the board. And he worked across the aisle with others in that committee to secure $50 million, even after those cuts, to ensure these programs continue. Because of this funding, lives are being saved and transformed, and we're so grateful for your leadership on that issue. Second, I want to lift up Senator Van Hollen's incredible leadership on immigration and on pushing back against the cruel mass deportation campaign against our neighbors. And the senator has not only spoken out again and again and again in Congress on this, but when his own constituent, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was deported unjustly to a prison in El Salvador, the senator got on a plane and traveled there to make sure he could meet in person with Kilmar. Right on. He returned to Washington and advocated fiercely for his release. And he made a difference not only for Kilmar, but for all of us. And third, I want to recognize Senator Hollen for his incredible leadership on confronting war crimes and atrocities in Gaza and being a steadfast friend to the Palestinian Authority. And the senator has even met with staff from the Ramallah Friends School who have visited Washington a number of times and made sure that funding for that school also continued. We're very grateful for the leadership. The senator has his own Quaker connections, which I'll let him comment on if he wants to. And welcome so much. Thank you. And we're so happy to offer you our Justice Award this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, for that warm introduction. Thank all of you for the important work that you do. It is wonderful to be here among friends. And I want to especially thank all of you who are part of the Friends Committee on National Legislation. I'm honored to receive this award, but most of all, I am grateful to you for being voices of moral clarity and for your principal advocacy for justice, for human rights, and for peace here at home and around the world. Thank you for everything you do all year round to try to make our country and our world a more just and better place. As Bridget hinted at, I grew up in a family that was part of a Quaker tradition. My father was born and raised in a Quaker family in Baltimore. And I inherited much of that tradition. I then went to Swarthmore College, which is a Friends College, an institution. And I just want to thank again the Friends for their tradition of teachings for peace, nonviolence, and justice. And all of us recognize that in this moment, justice and peace and human rights are under assault here at home and around the world. And it is our duty as individuals of conscience and individuals who have agency to do everything in our power to make this a more just and more peaceful world. And thank you all for being part of that effort. Here at home, we are seeing justice and human dignity under attack every day in so many pernicious forms. One of the most pernicious is, as we speak, tens of thousands of people are being locked up in inhumane conditions in detention camps around the country, concentration camps around the country. And overwhelmingly, and this is according to DHS's own data, overwhelmingly pose no threat to public safety. And so we have a duty to work every day to make sure that we end this inhumane practice. And that is why all of us have a duty to be showing up in our local communities to fight back against these detention centers that are holding so many people who pose no risk. It's why I keep showing up at the Baltimore holding facility to blow a whistle on the inhumane conditions there. You may have seen the video that went viral some weeks ago. I tried to go the very next day to the Baltimore holding facility. Not surprisingly, they said no, because they didn't want us to witness what was happening there. Fortunately, a judge made clear what we already knew, which is that members of Congress have a legal right, and I would argue a duty, to show up and look at those facilities, and we will continue to do that. And we will keep pressing. I will say, in the state of Maryland, there's an ongoing effort by ICE to build another detention center, concentration camp, to hold up to 1,500 people in Washington County. And I was pleased to be joined by hundreds of people on a very cold day months ago to say no to that detention center. And at least for now, DHS has put a hold on those plans because of the outpouring, the accusation. We're also seeing that as part of the implementation of this lawless ICE operation, DHS and the Trump administration are trampling over people's rights, our constitutional rights. We've already seen two individuals, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, gunned down and killed in Minneapolis because they were exercising their First Amendment rights. That is unacceptable in the United States of America, and we need to be clear. And then this administration had the temerity to turn around and call the victims domestic terrorists. Call the victims domestic terrorists. Well, I'll tell you, the only domestic terrorism emanating from a governmental source or any other source of this country right now is coming out of a White House, and we need to call it out. And that is why I have said, and I'm glad to be joined by so many of my colleagues in saying, that we will not vote for one more penny for this lawless space outpost. I would like to see meaningful reforms to rein in this lawless operation, but I'll tell you, they won't even agree to establish an independent, credible investigation into the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. They have denied the local law enforcement authorities access to information to conduct an independent investigation. And how in the world can we trust an administration or department that called the victims domestic terrorists? How can we trust them to conduct an independent investigation? We cannot. And so we will not provide any more funds because of that and so many other changes that need to take place. And we need to make sure we hold the line on that. Are you with me? Now, as part of this lawless ICE operation, they're also violating the due process rights of individuals around the country. So they're violating First Amendment rights. Frankly, they're violating Fourth Amendment rights by breaking into people's homes without warrants, and they're violating people's due process rights. And that's what they did just about a year ago in the state of Maryland when they illegally abducted Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was driving in his car with his 5-year-old son, who has autism, when they stopped him, snatched him, and disappeared him to a gulag in El Salvador by the name of Sicat, a place notorious for torturing its prisoners. That's what they sent him. And when I got together with his family, his wife Jennifer, and his kids, and his mother, and his brother, and we pointed out that he had been illegally abducted, the administration actually admitted that they had erroneously deported him. But after they admitted it, they said, too bad, we're going to keep him in the gulag in El Salvador. Tough luck. It was shameful. And frankly, like all of us in this room, and having met with his family, I got really mad. And so you're right, I did get on a plane and go down to El Salvador. And I met first with the vice president. The president was out of town at the time. The president had just recently visited President Trump in the Oval Office. You may have remembered those scenes. It was about a little more than a year ago now. And I'd actually written to the Salvadorian ambassador here in Washington, saying that while President Bukele is here meeting with the president, I'd like to meet with him because I wanted to talk to him about releasing Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And I put in that letter that if he didn't meet with me here, I would go down. Well, he blew me off here. I went down, and I met with the vice president and said I really wanted to meet Kilmar Abrego Garcia and that he should be released because he was disappeared from America in violation of his constitutional rights. And so he said, well, we haven't had enough time, so you're not going to get a chance to meet with him. And by the way, we're keeping him because the United States government is paying us to keep him. We have no independent basis for holding him other than the say-so of the United States government. And I said, well, by the way, the Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision, has called for the United States government to facilitate the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And they're not doing it. But I want you to work with me to release Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And so they said I couldn't meet with them. So the next day, we got in a car and headed out towards Sicat, this notorious gulag, and they had set up a checkpoint to prevent me from getting there. And they turned us around, and so I went back to the Capitol. San Salvador, and we convened a press conference at the hotel and made the point that the government of El Salvador was in gross violation of international law because he had been in a complete blackout. They were not allowing anybody to talk to him, not his wife, not the members of his family, and not his lawyers. A complete and total blackout. In fact, we didn't even know if he was dead or alive. And so, lo and behold, a little later that day, I was actually thinking of leaving. I got a phone call, and they relented. And so they brought Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the hotel I was staying at. And I got to tell him that he was actually in the middle of a big case in the United States. He had no idea. No idea. And that his wife and family were working actively for his release, and that members of his local union were standing up to demand his release. And that brought a smile to his face. The one thing he asked about was his own family and how they were doing. Well, long story short, despite the fact that the Trump administration said that they would never allow Kilmar Abrego Garcia back on U.S. soil, he is, as we speak, back home in Maryland with his family. But make no mistake, the Trump administration is engaged in a vindictive prosecution against him. In other words, because he exercised his constitutional rights, they decided to levy charges against him that had never been levied before. And so he is right now in the process of going through litigation, and they are still trying to deport him, despite the fact that they had illegally grabbed him and sent him there in the first place. But we need to continue to keep up the pressure. I remember about a year ago, there were lots of people, including in my own party, who were saying we shouldn't shine a spotlight on what's happening. We shouldn't talk about these issues. And the point I made back was that if you violate the constitutional rights of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, you threaten them for every single one of us. And you're not going to. Now, I also want to thank the Friends Committee for all the work that we have done together on programs here at home to prevent violence of all forms, but we know how devastating gun violence has been in our country. And when we got the proposed budget from the Trump administration last year, they had called for very deep cuts in this community violence prevention program. And it's a program that we use in Maryland for many things, including the Safe Streets program, those funds as well as other funds. And I think we all recognize that we're all better off if we put resources and invest money in preventing violence, whatever form it may take, in preventing violence up front, rather than devoting a huge amount of resources to locking people up after the fact. We are all better off by focusing on prevention and making sure that those resources are there so we can have safer communities. And I want to thank the Friends Committee for National Legislation for working with us to reverse those proposed cuts. And yes, we were successful at reversing those proposed cuts. So thank you very much for your help. And I will say the Safe Streets program in Baltimore and other similar violence prevention programs have succeeded in significantly reducing the homicide rate in Maryland and in Baltimore and in Maryland, and in making sure that we have a safer community. So when you've got something that's successful, you should continue to make sure you provide resources for that program. I want to thank you for that. Now, when friends talk about human rights and justice, you of course mean human rights and justice and peace, not only here at home, but around the world. That's what we mean by universal human rights. They're not confined to one place on earth. And Dr. King really said it best when he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And the Friends Committee understands that simple but powerful truth. And so we do need to work collectively to end the humanitarian catastrophes that we're seeing around the world, in Sudan, in Gaza, in Ukraine, and many, many other places. In Sudan, I have been trying to block the sale of US arms to the country of United Arab Emirates, the UAE, so long as the UAE continues to fund this murderous organization called the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan, which our own government has said is committing war crimes. And in Gaza, I've been very clear as well, as have the Friends, which is that after the heinous Hamas attacks on Israel of October 7th, Israel certainly had a right, was justified in targeting Hamas, but they were not justified in imposing collective punishment on all the Palestinian people in Gaza. And that's what we've seen. And that's why I've been very clear and joined with my colleague, Senator Sanders, and others in continuing to introduce what we call joint resolutions of disapproval, to say that if you've got any country, and Israel should not be exempted, you have any country that is using US weapons in violation of American law and international humanitarian law, we should not be complicit in that by sending more taxpayer-funded weapons. And now, of course, we have seen what's happening right now as we speak in the Middle East, in Iran, Lebanon, Israel, other places. We're seeing the terrible consequences and results of an illegal war started by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu against Iran. And we need to bring this war to an end, and we need to do it now. This war is making us less, not more safe. We are worse off, not better off. And when I say we, I mean people across the United States, people across the region, people across the world. We've seen 13 American service members killed, hundreds more wounded. We're not hearing much about those stories. We've seen over 2,000 civilians in the region killed, including 150 Iranian schoolgirls who were killed when a Tomahawk missile reportedly hit their school. We cannot be complicit in this, and we need to end it. And I have made clear that just like we're not going to fund and support a lawless, illegal ICE operation, I am not going to support one penny for this illegal war in Iran. Because right now we're all paying for it, not just in lives and be less safe, but it's costing all of you and taxpayers around the country $2 billion every single day. That's on top of the higher costs that people are paying for gas, oil, fertilizer. Farmers are beginning to understandably scream. All sorts of things are going up. So the president who promised that he was going to end wars and bring down prices has done exactly the opposite. He started a war and prices are going up. And that's why you see a majority of the American people opposed to this war. And we need to make sure that all of them are calling their members of Congress to demand an end to it. So my colleagues and I have been introducing war powers resolutions to end the war. Unfortunately, we've only seen one Republican, Senator Rand Paul, who has joined us in standing up for the Constitution and standing against this illegal and reckless war. But it's my view that we can never stop trying, and we need to hold everybody accountable. And so that is why just yesterday, a group of us, including myself, announced we're going to introduce, and I just introduced again yesterday, another war powers resolution, because we are going to make sure people have to keep voting on this until they wake up and end this war. And whatever you can do to mobilize people to be calling their members of Congress, especially right now, their Republican members in the Senate, to end this war. Because again, so many people, including people who supported Donald Trump, did so because he promised to keep us out of war, not start wars. And so this is a really important moment to remind everybody of that fact. Now, this war, of course, is mushroomed beyond Iran. Lebanon is on fire. Other parts of the region are on fire. A lot of disruption and violence in Iraq, and again, across the region, people being killed in Iran and Lebanon and Israel and elsewhere. And so we need to not only make it clear that we're not going to support the Trump administration's ongoing war, but Senator Sanders and I and some others have also introduced another round of joint resolutions of disapproval to say that we were not going to send bombs and bulldozers to the government of Israel. Because if you look at what's happening in Lebanon, you're seeing again indiscriminate bombing. In southern Lebanon, you are seeing a very deliberate effort to raise and collapse villages, specifically targeting Shia villages in the south, which is just another form of ethnic cleansing. Yeah. And this is an illegal operation under international law, and U.S. taxpayers should not be complicit in what's happening in Iran or in Lebanon. So let me just end where I started, thanking all of you. All of you are part of this very important community that recognizes that it's our duty to stand up every day, both here at home and around the world, for these important moral principles: justice, human rights, nonviolence, and peace. And thank you to the Friends and to the Friends Committee on National Legislation for all you do to advance those principles every day. You give me hope, and the people who are showing up around the country for No King's Day rallies give me hope. The people of Minneapolis give me hope, because all of these people are coming together to stand up for what we believe in, which is these core principles that we teach our children, and then too many people ignore as adults, which is those simple truths of justice, human rights, and quest for peace. Thank you all for being part of that thing. Thank you.